I'll be answering the question that every potential home buyer has. Is it better to rent or to buy right now? And I would say the most common assumption when I talk to people is that it's always better to buy than renting because you're paying for your own mortgage, you're not paying your landlord's mortgage, you're building equity. And 9 times out of 10, I would probably say it is better to buy than rent, especially if you're going to be living in that home for an extended period of time, maybe 5 years, 10 years, anything longer than that time period, it's usually better to just buy. However, I recently came across a scenario where it's actually better to rent than buy. And I want to share this scenario in case you're in a similar situation. So it's two borrowers who make about 150,000 a year. That's combined, and that is their gross income. So that's before taxes. They were looking at purchasing a townhome or condo for about 650,000 purchase price in LA County. They were also planning on putting about 5 or 3.5% down, depending on the type of loan they used. And their current rent situation is that they paid $1,500 a month. Their landlord actually hadn't raised their rents for the last 2 years on them. And on top of that, their property is rent controlled. So for those who don't know what rent control is, there is a maximum amount that their rent could go up every year. So let's dive into how we came to this conclusion that renting was better than buying in this scenario. I'm going to walk through the tool that we use to come to this conclusion and show you how you can figure this out for yourself. Okay, so here we're going to get into the fun part. We're going to go over the actual numbers and the calculator. This calculator was created by Michael Bluejay. Not sure who that is, but this is a very robust but simple to use rent versus buy calculator. It's been one of the best ones I've found, and it's a free resource online. So I'm going to go through the numbers here. First, the sale price of the home, $650,000. Down payment, 5%. Oh, a nice little feature too is if you click on these actual words, it kind of gives you a summary of what they mean. Mortgage term, so that's the number of years. We're going to go with 30. Mortgage interest rate, on a conventional loan today, on a condo, we're probably looking at somewhere around 7.5%. Closing costs rolled into the mortgage. We are not going to do that. We are going to pay our closing costs at close of escrow. Here, it looks like the monthly payment is $4,318. That does not include taxes, insurance, and PMI. This next box, if you have less than 20% down, we are going to say yes, account for PMI costs. Here, in this scenario, the credit score was 760. In this scenario, we did not run FHA because many condo complexes are not FHA approved. So we just assumed the most conservative, we're going with a conventional loan. Closing costs, this is auto generated here. This is a auto calculation. So about $20,000. I think that's pretty reasonable. It's a little bit high, but I'd rather be conservative than aggressive. Here, initial maintenance, we put 0. We're assuming that, you're going to be able to get your home inspection, the property will be move-in ready. Here in annual maintenance costs, we put $6,500, which is 1% of the purchase price. Monthly association fees, we're going to put $350. That's the average HOA that someone would pay in LA County. Inflation rate for above expenses. So inflation, we could probably put 4% right now. Property taxes, looks like this is auto calculated as well, probably around 1.25%. Homeowners insurance, this should be significantly lower. On a condo or on a condo, it's typically going to be about $100 a month. So I need to click this box, update this, or we'll say $100 a month. So $1,200. Here, it's not a duplex. They're not going to be renting anything out. Appreciation rate, 3.5%. Commission closing costs on resale. We can put, 6.5%. Sounds about right. So 5% is customary. 2.5% to the buyer's agent, 2.5% to the selling agent or listing agent, and then 1.5% for closing costs. So for the federal taxes, this is what they put in their scenario when we went over it together. Obviously, this is going to vary depending on your specific scenario. Okay, now we're going to fill out the renting assumptions. So their monthly rent is $1,500 a month, plus they have renter's insurance, which is about $100 a month. So they're $1,600. Rent inflation, I would say conservatively, we could put 5%, although their rent hasn't been raised. They are also in a rent controlled apartment. So the max it could be is 10% raised on them. We're using 5. I mean, their rents haven't been raised in the last 2 years. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So the idea in renting versus owning is that the money saved renting, you would be investing. And so on average, they said their Vanguard account gets them about 7% a year. Capital gains tax rate, 15%. Okay, so here's the results summary. Buying does not become better than renting during the first 30 years. You might be wondering how and why. So in this case, the rent is so much lower than your monthly payment and the interest you're paying on your mortgage that the assumption would be that you're investing most of that difference, and that investment would be getting you 7%. And so as long as you'd be renting and actually investing that money that you'd be saving, it's saying that you could potentially earn a return of $3 million after taxes. And that's what really makes this renting better than buying. So if you look at this table, I will say the table is a little bit bugged. So these negative numbers should be positive. But in this specific scenario, right, we're looking at cash spent. So on buying, it'd be $2.5 million over the 30 years because of your maintenance, your HOA fees, your property taxes, homeowner's insurance, maintenance on the home as well. And this is saying the home value would be 1.8 million after 30 years on a 650K purchase. And then here, this is your closing costs on resale, right? So the potential realtor fees, title, escrow, your closing costs on a sale of a home of $1.8 million. And so this kind of shows you your net total that was spent. Here, this is just your cash spent renting. Now that's obviously assuming as well, right? Your rent stays at $1,600 a month, but goes up 5% a year. And so here just looks at total money that was spent, if not investing, right? So here it would be the buying is better than renting here. Now, this number should actually be a positive number. It should be plus 2,925,000. And then this would basically be showing that you would be up $1.6 million because you technically made your $2.9 million from investing over 30 years. And then it would subtract this net money spent, 1.275 million. So you'd be up 1.65 million versus having spent $841,000. So in this specific scenario, renting better than buying. Now let's change one thing, because $1,600 for rent in LA is very cheap, especially rent controlled. And I'm going to change it to something higher, maybe $4,000 a month. And now if the rent was $4,000 a month, you can clearly see buying actually becomes profitable in year 6, right? And it shows you kind of the differences of each. So that's a really cool feature of this calculator. Wanted to share this scenario because it is so often that we just automatically assume buying is better than renting. But in this specific scenario, because their rent is so cheap and their situation they don't need to necessarily move out of their 1-bedroom apartment. Their goal right now is to just rent and invest as much as possible until they do need to buy a home. And so if you're really curious about your specific scenario, this is a good tool that can help you game plan and see, okay, how long do we need to stay in a home? And does this fit our situation? So I hope you thought this video was helpful. I hope I helped answer the question of rent versus buy. I know usually we think buy is always the best decision, but in this specific scenario, renting was better. If you'd like to walk through your specific scenario, feel free to email me. Here's my email. And if you thought this video was helpful, please subscribe.